video, we're going to look at two more controls that we have available in our toolbox in C# and Visual Studio. And that is RadioButtons and CheckBoxes. I'm going to look at the differences between those and how you would use one over another. Here's our RadioButton demo, and I can choose an item in the list here of select your favorite sport. And RadioButtons are what we call mutually exclusive, meaning I can only select one. So if I choose baseball and also want to choose football, I can't do that. Whatever I select last is the selected item, and the previously selected item is deselected. So I can choose one and click Submit, and I get a dialog box that says you chose football as your favorite sport. Touchdown, go Cardinals. If I choose golf, I get you chose golf as your favorite sport. In the cup, can I play through? And then finally basketball. You chose basketball as your favorite sport. Shoot for two, go Suns. So again, RadioButtons are mutually exclusive. CheckBoxes, however, are not. So over here in the CheckBox demo, I can choose multiple items and click Submit. And I'm told you regularly play baseball, basketball, and golf. We were asking the user what sports do you regularly play. They could choose just one if they wanted, or they could choose none, and we get a dialog box that says, is there another sport you play regularly, yes or no? And then we could do something with that input, maybe show them other sports. I can also select all of these, and I get all of those in my dialog box. So that's the difference between RadioButtons and CheckBoxes. Let's take a look at each of these projects. I'm in Visual Studio 2019, and this is the RadioButton demo project I put together. Each RadioButton was brought over to the form from the RadioButton control in our toolbox. And each has a text, which is the text we see next to the RadioButton. And I name these with the Hungarian notation of RBs. This is RB baseball, this is RB basketball, and so forth. Since these are all on the form together, these are mutually exclusive. I don't have to program that. Visual Studio and C# takes care of that for me. Let's take a look at our code for the Submit button. So I created 3 prompts, and one prompt number 2, is just 2 carriage returns. Then I have an if, else if control structure. I'm looking to see if the checked property of RB baseball is true. Now checked is either true or false. I could say equals true, but I don't need to do that because checked is either true or false. So if it's checked, I'm going to set prompt 1 to you chose baseball as your favorite sport, and prompt 3 will be play ball, go Diamondbacks. And then I do an else if on all the other RadioButtons. For example, if you choose hockey, then prompt 1 would be you chose hockey as your favorite sport, and prompt 3 is brr, it's cold, go Coyotes. At the end of that then, well, here's my else fork. If you chose nothing as your favorite sport, my prompt 3 was what? You don't like sports? And my message box then is to show prompt 1 plus prompt 2 plus prompt 3 and then your selection. Let me just run that again. So I chose tennis, and I'm told I chose tennis as my favorite sport. It's your serve. And if I choose baseball, you chose baseball as your favorite sport, play ball, go Diamondbacks. So the checked property is what we want to look at when we're evaluating whether the user has selected that particular RadioButton or not. Now I want to look at the CheckBox demo. Same thing here, but I created these as checkboxes, same 6 sports, and we asked the question in a label, which sports do you regularly play? Each checkbox is created by bringing a checkbox control over from our toolbox, and it has a name. And I use Hungarian notation of CBX. So this is CBX baseball, and of course the text is baseball, and that's what appears after the checkbox. Now it also has a checked property. In this case I've set them all to false. If you wanted to have this appear with default check marks in some of these, you could set that checked property to true. My submit button then is I created a string called sports, and I set it equal to a null value, a null string value. And then I use an if structure. If cbxbaseball.checked is equal to true, sports plus equals baseball. Did the same thing for basketball, except I didn't do the is equal to true. I don't need to, again, because checked is either true or false. So here, if it's true, if they checked that box, then sports, I'm going to append to it or concatenate to it plus equals. I do a comma, a space, and basketball. So if they chose baseball and basketball, they'll get baseball, comma, space, basketball. If they didn't choose baseball, they'll just get a comma, space, basketball. And we'll come back later and remove that comma at the end if that's what it leads with. The next four I simply did as ternary conditionals, just to kind of clean things up a little bit, a little less space required in terms of our code, but basically it's the same thing as this. So if football was checked, I'm going to concatenate comma, space, football. Otherwise, I concatenate a null string. And I do that for all four of those. Then I have an if fork that checks to see if sports is still equal to a null value, meaning they didn't check anything. In which case, I'm going to show a message box that says, is there another sport you play regularly? And the title being nothing selected, and we'll give them yes, no buttons. Else, meaning they've selected at least one thing, we'll look at our else fork here. I'm going to remove the leading comma space if it exists. So sports, again we use a ternary operator. If sports.substring 0, 2, that's the first two characters of sports, if it equals a comma space, then I'm going to have sports equal sports.substring 2. It's going to start with character index 2, our third character, and go to the end of the string. That will eliminate the comma space. Otherwise, I just set it back to sports. And then my message box is you regularly play. I do a new line character and my prompt of sports, which is all the sports that are comma delimited that they chose. My title's you're an athlete, and I simply use an OK button. Again, let me run this. So if I chose just basketball, I get just basketball. If I choose baseball and basketball, I get baseball, comma, basketball. I can add in hockey. If I choose all six, I'll get all six, comma, delimited. And if I choose none of them, meaning sports was equal to a null string, I get a dialog box saying nothing selected as the title. Is there another sport you play regularly, yes or no? And again, I could do something with those responses. In working with checkboxes, I find the ternary conditional statements to be a little bit cleaner than writing if structures. Now we've stated that radio buttons are mutually exclusive on a form. However, we can group radio buttons together within a container, and the radio buttons within that container are mutually exclusive only to each other. So I have here some radio buttons that we can choose. I can choose a gender, I can choose an age range, I can choose a major and click submit, and I get information on each of those areas. So you are a female general business major who's between 36 and 45 years old. And I pulled information from each of those grouped areas. Or I could say male, 25 to 36, marketing, and you are a male marketing majors between 25 and 35 years old. Or we could do female, 18 to 24, mobile app development, and I get you are a female mobile app development major who's between 18 and 24 years old. So it pulls the appropriate data from each of those three areas. Let's take a look at this in Visual Studio. So in Visual Studio, I created the panel container We've looked at how to do that before. And in that panel, I set the name here to P&L gender, and I added a label and 2 text boxes. The text box is RB female and RB male. And did the same thing with this panel. This is P&L age, and created 5 radio buttons. So this one is RB under 18, RB age 18 to 20 underscore 24, RB 25 underscore 35, RB 36 underscore 45, and RB over 45. And then this over here on the right is a group box. I didn't name it. I left it as group box 1. I could have named it GRP major. But again, here we have some radio buttons. So RB accounting, RB cybersecurity, RB entrepreneurship, RB general business, RB marketing, RB mobile app, and RB web design. Let me get rid of my panel. Let's take a look at the code. So first of all, I declared a string called G major and set it equal to undeclared. I'll show you how I use that as one way of working with radio buttons. But our BTN submit button, I created 2 strings of gender and age range. And again, the major is going to come from that class level variable of G major. And I first want to check to make sure they selected a gender. So here's where I use that not operator we looked at in the previous video. I have RB female.checked or RB male.checked. If one of those is checked, that's a true statement. And this not operator makes it a false statement, which means that this then is not executed as far as the statement in this fork. However, if neither female or male are checked, then this is a false statement, and the not operator now makes it true, which triggers this message box of please select a gender and the title of no gender chosen. I did the same thing with an else if, looking at those other 5 radio buttons for age. RB under 18.checked, RB age 18 underscore 24.checked, 25 underscore 35, 36 45, and over 45. And again, if none of those are checked, this little not operator makes that true, and it triggers the message box of please select an age range and the title of no age range chosen. Then I check to see if G major is undeclared, which is what I set it as the default value up here. I'm going to come back to the way that's changed in a minute. Let's finish up this code for the submit button. So if it's still undeclared, they didn't choose a major, then we're going to show a message box of please select a major and the title no major chosen. If they have selected a gender, an age, and a major, then we'll begin to assemble our prompt for the message box. And I'm going to say gender using a ternary conditional statement. If female.checked is true, we're going to put female to gender. Otherwise, we'll put male into gender. Since we've already determined they selected something, the only choices are female and male at this point. Then I select age range to not selected. So if under 18 was checked, then I'll set age range to under 18 years of age. Otherwise, I just keep it as age range. Then I also check to see if they checked 18 underscore 24, and I'll set the value of that then for age range to between 18 and 24 years old. And I do the same thing for the other 3 radio buttons, checking to see if they've been checked, setting the value of age range to the appropriate string based on their selection. Otherwise, I keep it as age range. And then I assemble a message box. And the message box simply says you are a, and I'm concatenating the gender, either female or male, a space, and then concatenate the G major, the major they've selected, plus a literal string of space major who is space. The age range might be between 36 and 45 years old, and then a period. And my title is demographic data. Now here's how I handled the radio buttons for the major. Let's go back to our interface design. I took all of the radio buttons that are in the major group panel, and I went to the events in the properties and went to the CheckedChanged property. And here I created a method called major selected. And then my code. Here's major selected. Remember, we have our object named sender, which in this case could be any one of those, I don't know if it was 7 or 8 radio buttons. What I did was I cast sender as a radio button and put it into a radio button object called myRB. I'm guaranteeing to C# that sender can be treated as a radio button. And then I can take myRB and I can get the text of that. So whatever the text value was of the selected radio button, that goes into G major. And then I simply use that in my prompt and use it up here to make sure that they had selected a major. Now when we run this, because I created the group panel first, by default it's going to select a radio button in that group. So I would never get undeclared as an option here because it's always going to select something. If I wanted to test that undeclared, I can come back to our initialized components. I'm just going to paste in some code here, and that is going to set the web design check to true, set it to false, and then I set G major back to undeclared because in initializing the components it set G major to accounting. So now we can test this. What's interesting when I run this is now these are all set to no selection, but it forced one radio button to be selected, so it went over to the gender and set that one to true. But now we can check see if the undeclared works or not. So when I say submit, I'm told to please select a major. So that methodology of just using the class level variable and checking to see if its value is a non-chosen entity works. I'm going to go back to my code, get rid of this, and now the major is selected as accounting, and again I can choose female mobile app and get the appropriate response. So there are different ways that we can handle radio buttons. Choose the one that makes the most sense to you for your particular situation.